Welcome in to the Fantasy Playmakers podcast. I am your host, Jeremy. You can find on Twitter at PopesFFH. It is June 1st, and I am joined by Ryan, as always, who you can find on Twitter at Mackie_FFB. How's it going, Ryan?
Not too bad, man. Had my weekly soccer game again today, and my kid finally scored a goal today, so I was pretty pumped about that. But now it's time to shift my focus a little bit to this.
So now he's moving up the dynasty ranks over there in fantasy soccer, as we can see.
He's got to be the dynasty 101 at this point now.
Yeah, for sure. We are joined by a very special guest today. We are joined by Bob from I-80 Sports, who you can find on Twitter at I80_sports. How's it going, Bob?
Doing great. Thanks so much for having me. Just happy to be here talking about the NFC South.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely something exciting. I think that the NFC South is one of those really polarizing type divisions this year. I think a lot of movement kind of down there, a lot of skilled players, and a lot of, I guess,
question marks.
Skill players depending on the question marks of quarterbacks. I think you got two teams that are really leaning on quarterback play there. So, but before we dive into that, we're here to let you guys know we do have a Scott Fish Bowl giveaway, guys. We are honored to have the opportunity to give away one spot to the main event of Scott Fish Bowl 11 via yards per. And we have been running for probably about, what would you say, Ryan? I think it's been 4 or 5 days now. There's a link on yards per Twitter. Also, you can go to yardsperfantasy.com to find the link as well to enter a promo code that we will be giving away later. But there are multiple steps you can do to earn entries into this, which is you can watch live today, which will earn you 3 entries. You can also follow Yards Per on Twitter for 2 extra entries. You can visit the Yards Per on Facebook, YouTube, or Instagram. You can also subscribe to the Feed Me podcast on Spotify or Apple. You can also subscribe or follow us on YouTube and or Apple and Spotify. And the big one is if you download the Yards Per app, you can get 5 extra entries. The drawing will be held next week on the podcast. And you have until, I believe it is Saturday, to get all your entries in. So definitely do that. That's pretty exciting. I know Ryan got his official invite. Bob, did you get an invite to Scott Fish? I don't know.
I did not, but I downloaded the app. So, guys, we're looking forward to this. I got my 5 entries in already.
There you go. And I think this counts as at least 3. We'll let Alex know that he's got to give you at least 3. I mean, you're part of the actual live broadcast, so it counts as watching.
That's true. Dude,
yeah, so maybe we'll give him a bonus one.
Did you see Alex actually posted on Yards Per how many entries we have as of right now?
I did not. So look at that. Ryan stepping up to the plate.
As of 5 minutes ago, there are 748 entries.
Oh, boy.
Feeling good about my chances, boys.
Hey, you never know, you know? Heck, I didn't think I was going to get in, and then I didn't think Ryan was going to get in, and then I just tossed him in on a Scott Fish post, and Scott tricked us all with the plot twist and got all you guys in there. That was pretty intense. So,
dude, I was sitting there watching that video, and I'm like watching my guy. I'd like zoom in on my screen really far, and I'm like, oh my god, like I'm getting my ass kicked right now. And then all of a sudden, like it popped up saying that everybody was invited, and I was like, wait a second. I literally had to like rewatch the video like twice to make sure I was reading it correctly. I had to pause the video, make sure I read it right. It was exciting, man. It was cool.
Yeah, I'm excited for you. I unexpectedly got in too, so then we'll see how this goes.
You were getting in regardless. You were getting in.
Maybe we'll see. But let's move on. Let's get to the meat of this episode. I think, like Bob had alluded to, I think everybody's excited and here to learn about the AFC South and what we just think about this entire division as a fantasy, as it goes to fantasy. So let's start with the Atlanta Falcons here, guys. Bob, I'll let you lead us off here. I want to talk about Matt Ryan. He finished as quarterback 12. He had 293.44 points, according to Fantasy Pros. What do we expect from Matt Ryan? Do we see a increase here, or do we see a decrease, do we think, in finishing position? I know that they've come out and said that Arthur Smith said that he's going to pass a little bit more than he did in Tennessee. But what do you think? I personally think quarterback 12 might be, I think that's going to kind of be where he ends up again, but I want to know what you think.
Yeah, so when I started him out, I had 419 completions, 5,032 yards. So I had that volume was there a little extra. I have him coming back down to earth, 28 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. That for me lands him 18 points per game, would lands him exactly quarterback 12, which is exactly where he was last season. I think he's going to do it a different way. I could see the yardage and the volume being higher, but the efficiency and the touchdowns being a little bit lower. 5,000 is a huge mark, but in 17 games, if he's healthy, I can see him reaching that.
Yeah, I think projections they just seem crazy. I did some this year for the first time, and I'm looking at them, and I'm like, man, like that extra game just makes those numbers look crazy. So I think it's going to be intense too this year with that extra game as far as fantasy goes. But Ryan, how do you feel about Matt Ryan?
Yeah, QB 12 seems about right. He, since 2017, he's averaged 4,500 yards, 27 touchdowns, QB rating at 96, over 600 pass attempts a season. So that seems about right. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised at 4,800 yards, 29, 30 touchdowns or so, and just kind of stay on track for where he's been over the past few seasons. But I think his projections have to change a little bit if Julio moves. Obviously, I think their defense isn't going to get any better, and they lack a solid run game. So I feel like they are still going to have to throw the ball a ton, but not having that alpha receiver at all outside of Calvin Ridley. I mean, obviously those two make up a pretty solid wide receiving core, so that helps out his numbers a little bit. So I'm curious to see what will happen exactly if Julio is in fact traded here in the next couple weeks or so.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something to monitor. Because I agree. I think we'll move right into that and kind of lure into the wide receiver position there. Julio last year only played in 9 games. He did see 68 targets and produced 771 yards. He's obviously Matt Ryan's favorite target, longest standing target as well. However, Calvin Ridley kind of took over the change of the guard there. And I know there's a lot of talk sometimes where Calvin Ridley, they don't think that he can handle it outside of Julio. But personally, I'm a big Calvin Ridley guy. And I think Calvin Ridley has proven multiple times that without Julio Jones, he can perform. His numbers are a little bit lower, but they're not crazy. We're talking like maybe 1 or 2 points per game of a difference. I do worry a little bit for Matt Ryan if Julio moves on, but I think that still they have Russell Gage, they have some other options, and then added obviously Kyle Pitts. So as far as these wide receivers go, Bob, how do we feel? Do we think that Julio leaving is a huge effect, or do you think it just bumps, say, like a Russell Gage up again?
Well, as far as I know, on June 1st, Julio Jones is a member of the Atlanta Falcons, and I had his stat him out as if that he was going to be a member next season. Now, I think that Calvin Ridley is going to get his, and he's cemented in. And what I really like about them, like Julio Jones is not a touchdown guy anyway. He's never been a touchdown guy in his career. So Ridley has all the touchdown upside that Julio Jones never had. And I think that they're unaffected. I don't think that's going to be an issue. I think if Julio Jones is gone, that raises Russell Gage. That brings Olamide Zaccheaus up to that next level. And I think everyone else kind of fluctuates and kind of fits into, however the targets fall. Right now I have Calvin Ridley, 1,458 yards on 99 receptions for 11 touchdowns. And if Julio's not there, I don't think I'm changing any of those stats.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think like they're just going to move the targets that they would have given. Oh, bye, Ryan. They would have given us to Julio. They would have given, I think we'll just end up with Gage like you had mentioned. However, let's add Ryan in here real quick since he bailed on us. Ryan, why'd you leave us?
My Wi-Fi is messing up for some reason, man.
Yeah, sure. You just didn't like what Bob had to say, did you?
No, I actually didn't catch anything that he said. He started talking. All of a sudden, he started going all robot digital on me. So I don't really know what he said, to be honest.
I said Ridley's good and Julio doesn't matter.
He did say that, basically.
In a lot more words.
Which basically made me happy. So I'm cool. We can just end the episode now if you guys want to know. But no, Ryan, how do you feel? Do you think Julio leaving affects Ridley? Like he's going to get a bump? Or do you think Ridley kind of just stays where he was last year, how Bob had alluded to, with about 99 receptions, 1,400 yards. And then you just see kind of a bump from like the rest of the guys below them, like a Gage, the Olamide Zaccheaus, however you say his name. Sorry, I totally probably butchered that. Bob said it much better. Or even like say Kyle Pitts or Hayden Hurst.
No, I honestly think Ridley kind of just stays where he's at. I mean, he was 5th last year in receiving yards, 4th in yards per game last season. And the people that say that he
Oof, Ryan's leaving us again.
So what I see here for the
yards a game without Julio, so it's not like he needs him in the lineup to produce.
Understandable, although you did break up a little bit there. But let's go real quick. Obviously, I think we've hammered that out. Like Bob had said when you came back, the quick answer is Calvin Ridley is good. Stop going with the narrative that without Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley is going to suffer. It's not going to happen. And then Julio Jones is still relevant. However, if he leaves, it doesn't really affect too much outside of, or doesn't give Ridley that much of a bump. So let's go on to the running backs here and how.
I will say one thing real quick, Jeremy. Sorry.
Okay.
Russell Gage's current ADP, when I looked, is wide receiver 77 right now. And if you're getting him at that value, even if Julio's there, he was wide receiver 37 last year in PPR. If Russell Gage is at wide receiver 77 in your league, he should be an automatic buy on everybody's fantasy team, regardless.
Yeah, I mean, I like that. I've held on to Russell Gage's whole offseason just because of the question marks with Julio Jones. I mean, I've added people in drafts and stuff like that, but I still feel like Gage, I've dropped a couple other people that, like a Tim Patrick or somebody like that in that same category. I think Russell Gage has a chance to still see good volume, especially if Arthur Smith holds up to what he's saying, where they're going to come over, they're going to pass more than they are going to run. But let's get on to the run game here. We obviously know Mike Davis was signed. He seems to be the lead back in this backfield, as there is just a bunch of, I would say, 3 guys who I don't know who's going to be the running back too, so I'm going to ask you guys. So we have Ito Smith, who's still there. There's Javanian Hawkins, who they signed out of Louisville as an undrafted free agent rookie, and also Caleb Huntley, who they signed as an undrafted free agent rookie out of Ball State. So who do we think emerges as the RB2 behind Mike Davis here, Bob?
I have Quadri Olison as the running back 2 and Tony Brooks James as the running back 3.
Wow, really? Quadri Olison. I totally forget. I stashed him for so long on so many dynasty rosters, and here I am just neglecting him.
You're not going to use him in 2021 either.
Yeah, probably not. Never. But let's be real then. Let's go with Mike Davis. What do we think? Is Mike Davis going to exceed his RB12 that he had last year in PPR leagues, or do we see him being somewhere in the same or kind of a drop off just based on guys returning healthy this year? Bob?
Yeah, so I have him getting a huge target share in the, rush share. And that leaves him at 265 rushes, which is still kind of a disappointing number. As good as Mike Davis was for a couple of weeks, he was a liability over the second half of the season. If you had him on your roster weeks 9 through 16, you were cringing submitting that every week because he had a pretty poor rest of the season. I have him at about 3.8 yards per carry, which would land him 1,000 yards, 1,007 yards. I have him 9 overall touchdowns and about 300 receiving yards. So 1,300 yards, 9 touchdowns. That has him 11.8 fantasy points. Late running back 1.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's like extreme high upside, to be honest. I agree with you. I think Mike Davis kind of tailed off. It was interesting looking like he really only averaged 9.8 PPR points a game last year. And I agree. I think he tailed off there at the end. And I just think, I mean, he's going to be 29 this year, right? I believe.
He's been around.
So
he just turned 28.
Just turned 28. So what is Arthur Smith's role going to be? Obviously, he's coming out. He's going to say he's going to pass. You don't take Kyle Pitts 4th overall and not throw him the ball. So I just feel like Mike Davis, I think, like Bob had alluded to, that 250-ish to 60 kind of area seems about right. The question is his efficiency going to go up or down versus Carolina and Atlanta? And I do think that possibly like Quadri Olison Javanian Hawkins had some flash. I mean, there could be a more of an RB by committee here than we think. So I'm not sold on Mike Davis being like this great buy this offseason. I think he's a decent buy, but I think that late RB1, I feel like RB2 is more of a realistic number, like that 15, 16 range. Ryan, how do you feel about Mike Davis?
Well, I might have missed it. Do you have his numbers from last season in front of you, Jimmy?
I don't have his statistics, but I know he finished RB12 and he had 147.5 PPR points.
He had 165 rushes for 650 yards, almost 60 receptions for 375. So about 1,000 yards.
Okay.
Thank you, Bob.
So I forgot to put in my notes exactly what his stats were, but since 2010, only 5 running backs at age 28 or older have had a season like Davis had last season. So those numbers are better. Shady McCoy, Mark Ingram, DeMarco Murray, Matt Forte, and LT. So are we thinking that Mike Davis is on that level of a player at age 28?
No. Personally, I don't think so. That's what I'm saying. I don't see – I can't see them using him like they use Derrick Henry, for example. You know, I mean, I feel like everybody's thinking Arthur Smith's going to use him like Derrick Henry gets used in Tennessee when he was there, but I just don't see that. I think Arthur Smith also came out and said he wants to pass more. The Atlanta team's built to pass. They're not built to run the ball 300 times.
I don't think they're going to have the opportunity to run the ball because they're going to be behind
like you
so
said.
often in games. So I'm going to go no, but when I talk about running backs, I like to look at that 1,600 carry mark because it seems like that 1,600 carry mark is a lot more important than age when you talk about tread on the tires. Mike Davis, he's older, but he's been kept out of games for better or for worse. So I don't really think that he should factor in with those guys because those guys were superstars the second they touched in the league. I think Mike Davis can do it. He's not. Is anyone excited about Mike Davis?
I'm not personally. I mean, his quad pick was pretty intense. You know, he's got some pretty big quads now. So he's up there with AJ Dillon. So outside of that,
down there with AJ
Dillon. Yeah. Down there.
Bob, what'd you say about his what'd you say about his last half of the year or so? What'd you say he looked like the last half of the year?
Not good. I think he looked great the first 8 games, and he looked like a liability.
Right. So because he had a career high in snaps, rushing attempts, yards, touchdowns, targets, receptions, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns. So at 28 years old, he might have another great first half, but if he already died down last season after that workload, do we really? I just can't see Atlanta leaning on him completely to be that main back that everybody is seeing him to be. And I'm not saying he won't have a good year. I'm not saying that at all. I think he'll have a relatively solid season. I just can't see him finishing as an RB1 again by any means.
And CM Brown appears to think that Javanian Hawkins is going to take over, which, you know, that is definitely a possibility. I mean, Javanian Hawkins has some wheels, so Mike Davis starts to tread out there, you know, they could always plug him in.
My one prediction for Atlanta would be just like last year with Russell Gage. There's going to be someone that we're not talking about now who's going to be a factor in 2022. And
I'm big on Caleb Huntley, honestly. I know a lot of people are screaming the Javanian Hawkins side, but Matt FF Dynasty on Twitter over at the Fantasy Wildcard kind of lured me on to Caleb Huntley. And you watch some tape. I mean, he looks pretty good. You know, looks a little bit like he doesn't have necessarily that big burst, but looks like a pretty solid runner. He could be something possibly. But let's move on to the exciting player here. Drafted 4th overall, Kyle Pitts. What are we expecting here, guys? The tight ends have always kind of come out rookie years and disappointed. But, I mean, this guy's built up as a generational guy. Do we think he gets a top 10 dynasty or a top 10 PPR finish this year, Bob?
I think that this is more reliant on the Julio Jones situation than anything with any of the other wide receivers. Kyle Pitts is a tight end. He was drafted as a tight end. He said in college he wanted to block. He wanted to play tight end. So I don't think he's going to be one of those pseudo wide receivers coming out the gate, and that means his rookie year he's got to take a step back. Now, if Julio Jones goes and they need that star power, maybe they're going to use him more like a wide receiver, but I would not predict that as the team stands right now. I have him projected at 95 targets, 65 receptions, and 775 yards, which is extreme. No rookie tight end should ever be put that high. And we were talking about his tight end, his end zone threat. In college, I have him as 5 touchdowns. I see people putting him double digits already. Not for rookie, not for me, not yet. That puts him at tight end 7. I'm not excited for Kyle Pitts right now where it stands. Rookies in the tight end position don't do very well. He's not a wide receiver. He's not a wide receiver. He does play tight end. So that's where I got him, tight end 7. I know that at tight end 7, I will not own him this season.
Yeah, I think he's going crazy in dynasty drafts. I'm assuming he's going to go crazy in redrafts as well once we get closer. But I think if he finishes tight end 7, I mean, he's going to be untouchable. I don't think that you're going to be able to trade for him. I don't think you're going to be able to make any moves for him. I just feel like that seems fair to me. A lot of people want to put him at 4 already next year, and that they think, like you'd said, a lot of people are saying double-digit touchdowns, almost 900 yards, and I just don't see it. Like, I'm not saying Kyle Pitts is bad. I think Kyle Pitts is a very talented player. I think he's a very good tight end. I just don't see him being that big of a factor in this offense that quick, especially with Julio there. Because like you had said, Calvin Ridley's kind of just, he shored up the red zone area. And I feel like, I mean, Hayden Hurst did have 6 touchdowns last year. So if Pitts just takes over, and that's where Hurst ended as tight end 10 last year, which was 571 yards on 88 targets. So, I mean, if he just takes over that role, I mean, yeah, I think
I'm glad you brought that up because Hayden Hurst is still there. And Hayden Hurst is really good at football, and he's a veteran.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And I just don't see, I mean, I like Kyle Pitts, but they've also come out and said they might line him up out wide. So, like, what's his role going to be? So I just want to, I don't know. I'm not like super high on Kyle Pitts for 2021, we'll say. But I think as a dynasty asset, I mean, Kyle Pitts is great, but I personally also don't own him much of anywhere just because, like you had said, where he's getting drafted either in startups or rookie drafts, like that's just too rich for me at a tight end position. But
101 in rookie startups. I've seen him go that high.
Yeah, I saw somebody take him at 1-1 in a dynasty startup because he knew he wasn't going to get him at 2-1. So, I mean, and it was a super flex league just because they really wanted him, which, okay. I mean, get your guys. That's what makes dynasty fun. But Ryan, Kyle Pitts, what are you thinking?
I mean, like you said, if he finishes as tight end 7, he's going to be untouchable. I mean, I've seen trade offers with my own eyes that is Pitts for Travis Kelce straight up and got turned down. If I had Kyle Pitts and somebody offered me Travis Kelce for him straight up, I'm taking it, whether I'm rebuilding or contender, doesn't matter. Just because Kelce's proven and his hype is just unreal right now. But Arthur Smith did target his tight ends 30% of the time last year. Hayden Hurst is good at football, like you guys said. So I don't think that 30% target share would all go to Kyle Pitts. So even if he gets even if their tight ends get a 25% target share, Pitts probably gets half of that, maybe a little bit more with Hayden Hurst being there. Because like you guys said, he's a veteran. He knows the system. He's already been there. I mean, the system might change a little bit, but he is still like a connection with Matt Ryan. And it's just, I don't know, like you guys said, I'm not going to have a whole lot of shares of him just because he's getting taken so high. I have 1 share of him I took him in a rookie draft that was tight end premium, and I got him at the 104.
I do have right now, that is exactly what I have. I have a 25% target share for the tight ends. I have them broken down 95 targets for Pitts, 75 targets for Hayden Hurst. That is going to be skewed towards the beginning and the end of the season. Like Hayden Hurst is going to have more, I feel, at the beginning, the first 6-8 weeks. Kyle Pitts, if he could turn it on, he's going to win some people some fantasy championships because week 15, week 16, maybe he gets in the end zone, becomes a favorite target at that point. But where you take him, you're going to risk going 2 and 3, to start your season out before he gets going. Not for me.
I love it. I love all those points. Let's move on to another exciting team here in the offseason, the Carolina Panthers. The Panthers traded away Teddy Bridgewater, and they brought in Sam Darnold. Darnold kind of has had a bad rap up in New York. Last year, he finished as QB 30 in 12 games. He averaged 12.9 points per game. Is Sam Darnold a viable quarterback 2 for you, Bob, as far as Superflex goes, or is he just kind of a bench kind of QB3 type finish this year?
He absolutely is. I think Darnold is going to be much better in Carolina Panthers, but better Sam Darnold, it only gets you so far. I have him at 550 attempts, 364 completions, 3,843 yards, 26 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. So low touchdowns and a terrible ratio, but I still think he gets 15.5 fantasy points per game, which lands him at 20 in my book. And in a 2 QB league, 20 gets you done.
Yeah, I mean, I like that spot. I like that spot a lot. I think that's a good spot for Darnold and a good expectation, we'll put it as. How about you, Ryan?
So I'm honestly not sure what to think of him because while I was doing my research, I literally just saw a lot more negative stats than I saw positive stats for him. Like everything I saw. The only good stat that I saw was that according to Next Gen Stats, Darnold had the 5th highest completion percentage of receivers with at least 3 yards of separation while under no pressure. So while he's not getting pressured and receivers had 3 yards of separation, he's on target. 92.3%.
That happens a lot, doesn't it?
I could throw a football to an open guy with no one pressuring me too. Sign me up,
That
guys.
is exactly my point.
Poor Sam Darnold.
After that, it's just ugly. I mean, he ranks no higher than your 30th out of 50 in any key stat that I looked up in according to PFF.
Oof. All right, so Sam Darnold's a viable quarterback too in Superflex.
Just keep Adam Gase in the back of your head. Those are Adam Gase numbers, not Sam Darnold numbers.
So I got one key stat that pertains directly to Carolina. Okay, Carolina with a healthy CMC in 2019 ran the 6th most play action plays in the NFL. Sam Darnold was 37th in play action completion percentage of those 50 quarterbacks with at least 300 pass attempts the last 3 seasons.
So not good.
So not great for what they look to do at Carolina.
Stink, tank, tunk.
Bob comes in with the great. Bob, gotta love it.
I do love their weapons though. So I obviously like their weapons a lot more than I like the Jets' weapons from last season. In any season that Sam Darnold's been at New York, so I'm willing to look past that and say QB 20 is a fair assessment and projection for him at this current point.
Let's move on to those weapons that we love so much here in Carolina. Let's move right into the running back room here. CMC coming off the injury. Do you guys have him still as your RB1 as far as dynasty and redraft this season, Bob?
I do not, but I don't have him far. I have him as the number 4, and we could talk about, where I have the first 4 guys and then a huge gap and then everyone else. However, I could not fault anyone for taking him earlier. I want to know, is he getting the workload? Are they going to spell him a bit? I think we kind of learned some lessons last year with the usage and bringing him back a little early and what happened there. I don't think this team's going to be competing for anything, so we'll see what they get out of Christian McCaffrey, but I can't have him there anymore now.
All right, Ryan.
I feel like he still has to be the RB1 to me, just with his workload, even if he took like a step back. I mean, this is the first season that he didn't appear in 16 games. Maybe didn't finish all 16 in any season prior to this, but this is the first time he hasn't appeared in all 16 games. When he was healthy last season, they immediately got him 20 carries a game, 6 targets a game. So when he's healthy, he's clearly the vocal point of that offense. Prior to last season, 3 straight seasons of 100-plus targets, led the league in touches, scrimmage yards, and total touchdowns in 2019. He's just a fantastic football player, and you just don't – I understand that injuries can start to creep up on a guy, but he bulked up over last offseason to kind of help avoid that, and I feel like he just kind of got unlucky with his injuries. I don't feel like it's anything that we have to be concerned about in the long term. And he was just so far and away the best fantasy running back in 2019 that even if he does take a step back in terms of volume, I feel like he's just such an important part of that offense that he's still the RB1 in my book.
Nice. I like both opinions. Do we think that Chuba Hubbard will be a flex option this season? Do we think that he's going to get enough of a workload like Bob had alluded to where like they spell some of that from CMC? Or do we think that he gets used kind of like a Curtis Samuel type gadget type guy? What do we think here? What is our expectations for Chuba? Bob?
I think he does spell CMC at points, and I think he is a good handcuff. I have him at 160 touches, 130 rushes, and 30 receptions, which is not a whole lot. And that'll put him at 7.3 fantasy points per game, which is like running back 38. It's the back end of RB4. So I don't have him with much standalone value, but I do think he should be considered a top tier handcuff.
I like that. I liked Hubbard coming out of school too. So, I mean, I think that long-term Hubbard has some good value there. Ryan, let's move on to the wide receivers quick. Let's move on to DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson. Obviously the top two targets in this offense. Who do we think sees the larger target share? Robbie Anderson saw it last year at 136. DJ Moore had 118 targets. Ryan, who do you think is the lead target this year? Sorry for the pause there.
No, you're right. I mean, off the top of my head, I feel like Robbie Anderson might have a slight edge just because of his already established connection with Sam Darnold from his years with the Jets. But I feel like DJ Moore is just a better football player. I feel like he got super unlucky last season. I mean, I posted a stat that Carolina receivers are pretty unlucky as it is. DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson were both in the top two for uncatchable targets inside the red zone this past season. DJ Moore had 6 and Robbie Anderson had 5. So I feel like DJ Moore is one of those guys that people look at as like, oh, hey, he doesn't produce in the red zone, he doesn't get a lot of touchdowns. But when you're not getting catchable targets in the red zone, that kind of makes it hard to do. But in terms of who finishes higher in targets, I'm going to go with the better player and the better overall talent. Say DJ Moore finishes more targets.
How about you, Bob? How are we feeling here?
Yes, so it's tough because where I have him statted out right now, in order to give 120 targets to DJ Moore and 125 to Robbie Anderson, that means respectively they're getting 21.8 and 22.7% of the target share, which is a ridiculous number for two players to carry. However, that's what I got to predict from what I see on the page. I have 68 receptions for DJ Moore, 75 receptions for Robbie Anderson. Robbie Anderson is, he's the veteran. And I guess the story is that he's played before in that Jets offense, but he wasn't very good on the Jets. He was a player that you would never start in a fantasy league until last season. So it's tough. I have him right around the same spot. I have DJ Moore with more yards and 2 more touchdowns than Robbie Anderson. They're both in that, kind of range. That's what I call it. That's the tier. It's
yeah, I agree. I think a lot of people are pushing for DJ Moore to be like this wide receiver 1 type production this year. And I just don't see it. I don't think he's ever really produced it. And you can't say he hasn't had targets. Like, he had the targets last year. And I think the struggle is, like Ryan had said, where they have the bad red zone, like, catchable percentage there. However, it doesn't, as bad as this sounds, like, it doesn't matter. Like, if it's an uncatchable ball, it stinks for him, because the only way to really get into that top tier is to get those touchdowns. So I just feel like they're stuck in that, like you said, that wide receiver 2 type.
However, in the near tier, he might be the best guy there, because if you look at the guys going around him, Tyler Lockett, Chase Claypool, Odell Beckham Jr., DJ Shark.
So outside
I'm
of
taking him over them.
Yeah, I mean, I would be torn with DJ Chark, but I'm like really high on DJ Chark. So, but I agree. I think DJ Moore has the most upside of all those guys you listed there. So I could see the argument to be made. So let's move on from those two. And who do we have as the next guy in line? It's obviously Terrace Marshall would probably be that. But who do we think? Do we think like Cy Smith could make a run for their slot role? Bob?
I'm not interested.
Nothing for Cy Smith. How about Terrace Marshall? Nothing?
Terrace Marshall, I have him similar to like what Jalen Reagor would have done last season. I have him 45 targets, 250 plus yards. Again, not really interested. If something happens preseason or if something really stands out in camp, I have no problem moving these targets around. Like I said, I have almost 40% of the targets on 2 guys. So I'd love to distribute some targets elsewhere. I got to see with my eyes first.
Fair assessment. I always go off of that as a big assessment. I think that's one thing that I've noticed a lot since being really in this fantasy community, that like it almost seems like that's not like a big thing for some people. Like I think a lot of people just like to look and say, okay, there's 90 targets left behind. they can't give them all to this person. But like, I like to see, I'm a visual person. I like you said, Bob, to see it. Like if a guy proves that he can do it on tape, like I'm in. If he can't prove that, then what's the point of saying that he can do it? You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah.
Just kind of like, I agree there where I like want to see what his role is going to be before I'm like all in on, say, Terrace Marshall. But I do like Terrace Marshall, especially as a dynasty asset. I'm all in on acquiring him. But I just don't know as far as, like you said, 2021. He might be like a Michael Pittman, like you said, Jalen Reagor, where like they might blow up a game or two. But other than that, they might be a tough start this year. Ryan, how do you feel about either of those two guys?
So I see Shi Smith as possibly taking over that little gadgety type player that Curtis Samuel left behind. I just don't see him getting too many touches with all the weapons that they have outside of with CMC coming back and obviously Moore and Robbie Anderson that we talked about. I do have some interest in Terrace Marshall though, just because of the previous production that he showed in college. I mean, 600 yards, 23 touchdowns in about 2.5 seasons at LSU, and Joe Brady and their wide receiver coach over there, Frisman Jackson, had Terrace Marshall ranked as their highest wide receiver on the board when they drafted him. And Matt Rule has come out and said that his ability to play both outside and inside is paramount what they're trying to do this season with their wide receivers. So the fact that he's able to play in different positions on the field, like if Robbie needs spelled, or maybe they want to put Robbie Anderson in the slot and let Terrace Marshall play on the outside, I feel like that leaves a lot of space now on what the word is, a lot of versatility on the field that he can do, where he can play both positions and be effective in both spots.
Yeah, and I like that. So let's move on to a position that's in Carolina and not really used. I mean, Ian Thomas was the big talk last year, and everybody said Ian Thomas is going to break into that tight end one. Do we think Dan Arnold has that chance? Is Dan Arnold going to be a thing this year, or is it just another of Bob's meh because they don't use the tight end? Bob?
It's more than a meh. It's just no. You know where he's being drafted currently?
No, I haven't checked the DLS.
He's not being drafted currently, and that's exactly how it should be when the season starts.
Should I add him as a waiver, though? Like, do I got a shot? Like, is he going to be something?
You know the little blue flag next to him? Make sure it's not lit up because you don't want to see him refreshed.
Oh, okay. All right. Ryan,
I think
do you agree?
have 55 targets total for the tight ends. I have them split pretty evenly, 35 for Dan Arnold, 20 for Ian Thomas, and it doesn't amount to much, 200 yards, 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not excited about any of the tight ends in Carolina. I agree. I just think that it's a scheme. I don't know if it's more scheme or just they just don't believe in them, but they just don't really use them. So I'm not like overly excited there. Ryan, are you excited with Dan Arnold, or are you cool with just going with nah?
No, I'm cool with that. I mean, Dan Arnold had his career year last year with 31 catches, 438, and 4 touchdowns. So that's not really interesting to me, especially since Carolina only throws their tight end like 8% of the time or something like that. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Tommy Trumbull leads them in snaps at the tight end position just because he's such a good blocker. So I'm not interested in any of those guys for a fantasy standpoint.
All right. Before we move on, let's give out our special code release here to prove that you watched us live tonight. I'm going to run a banner across for it, and you can take this code, which is Playmakers, and you can go to yardsperfantasy.com/SFB and enter that there. This will get you the bonus entries into the giveaway for the position and the Scott Fish Bowl. And I'll give you guys a second, leave it up there. But yeah, let's move on here quick to the New Orleans Saints. Another team that has question marks at quarterback. Guys, who do we think it's going to be? Is it going to be Jameis Winston? Is it going to be Taysom Hill? Ryan, I will let you go first.
You would have me go first. To be honest, man, from a fantasy perspective, I feel like I want it to be Jameis Winston because we've already seen him produce as a top 5 fantasy option. And I feel like he just kind of opens that. He doesn't open the playbook up in terms of what they can do with the playbook. They just open it up to their wide receivers where he's more of a threat with his arm. I mean, Taysom obviously opens it up with his legs, and he maybe makes the defense play a little bit more honest. But from a fantasy perspective and having shares of Mike Thomas and Alvin Kamara, I'd much rather see Jameis Winston on the field for them week 1 as opposed to Taysom Hill.
And I'm going to agree with that. I think that that's what I feel like should happen. I feel like Jameis Winston is the true quarterback. Not that Taysom Hill isn't, but he kind of proved it last year that he's viable to an extent, but he kind of he's more of a stopgap. He's not going to really get the job done fully for a full season, I feel like. So to me, I want it to be Jameis Winston. I think Jameis Winston bumps a lot of these guys up as far as fantasy assets go. I think just in general, Winston will open up the run game because it's going to be more of I don't know if it's going to be because of play calls, but they will be able to have the opportunity to lengthen the field in the passing game because Winston does have a big arm. And I'm curious to see. I want to see if Sean Payton kind of improved his interception percentage there. I mean, obviously he threw for 30 touchdowns and 30 interceptions just
can't be much worse.
So, yeah, I mean, he's starting at the worst. So, I mean, he can only get better, right, guys? But
he can do Nathan Peterman.
Hey, Nathan Peterman is great. Okay. Sean McDermott said he was good. So, anyways, just a Bills joke there, and an NFL joke. But Bob, how do we feel? Do you think it's Taysom Hill or Jameis Winston?
I think it's Jameis Winston, hands down. Jameis Winston's the only pure quarterback on the team. And to be honest, I think Taysom Hill's value goes up the less he plays quarterback on this team. If Taysom Hill is the quarterback, you know what he brings to the table, and it's not very much. But as a tight end, flex, wildcat, I think Taysom Hill has more value. And we talked about opening up the playbook. Jameis Winston under center and bringing Taysom Hill in, you add another dimension. If Taysom Hill's the quarterback, that's it. That's what you have. So I definitely like what Jameis brings to the table. I have him at quarterback 12 right now. He's currently going at quarterback 26. So yes, I like him in 1 quarterback leagues. Yes, I like him in 2 quarterback leagues. He's going to have weeks he's going to kill you. But I think if he turns this around, if he has a good season, revitalizes his career, he could be the new poster child for LASIK vision. And, let's get it done.
Yeah, there's definitely endorsements. So if you are happening to listen or watch, Bob is just giving you marketing tips, and he would just like some endorsements for that. Right, Bob? I think,
Yeah, and I think we all know what that was. No one cares. Why did he put it on Twitter that I got LASIK vision? Players get that every offseason. Yeah. It was to show that he was like doing something. I mean, it was silliness, but I kind of feel like at the same point, it was a dedication towards bettering himself. Like that's what I took out of that. Who cares if he had contacts or I don't care. But the fact that he knew something was wrong and he needed to improve to move forward in his career. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's respect, right?
I'll buy in.
Let's move on to some of the skill players there. Let's move on to a player that I'm not as high as the consensus on, but yet some of the consensus is also out on it, so I'm not fully sure where I actually stand. But is Alvin Kamara, and what do we think without Drew Brees there and a possible dip in, say, like the check down type roles? Because we know Winston's going to just probably most likely chuck it up there unless Sean Payton's yelling at him. But what do we think about Kamara? Is he that top 5 running back again this year, Bob?
I have him as the number 1 running back overall for next season. I did not project all the teams, but where I have him for next season, and I kept saying, Bob, dial it back, Bob, dial it back, Bob, dial it back, and I just couldn't. I just was too excited, too many mouths to feed, too many opportunities to touch the football. I have him breaking 1,000 yards for the first time in his career. He had an ungodly 16 touchdowns rushing last season. I brought that down to 12. I'm cutting his stats left and right, and he's still getting that workload to be the running back 1 overall. What I would do, and I would advise anyone at home to do this too, say 17 games, Alvin Kamara number 1, and then for each game you think he's going to miss, move him down 2 spots, and you'll have him in the perfect spot for you.
It's a good strategy there. Ryan, how do you feel about Kamara?
I wasn't as high on him until I started doing a deeper dive into his production from last season, because I was a little bit worried about Taysom Hill, and I was a little bit worried about what exactly the offense is going to look like with Drew Brees being gone. But, I mean, if you look at his numbers from last season, he was just unreal in every way, shape, and form. He was second on the team in targets per game, led the team in overall targets and receptions with 83. Had his career high in rushing yards, rushing touchdowns, receptions, receiving yards, targets, 80 catches in every season of his career. From the running back position, he was 4th in red zone touches, 1st in target share, 1st in yards per route, 2nd yards per touch, 7th in goal line carries, which he's not really looked at as a goal line back, but 7th in goal line carries is extremely extremely high for a guy like him who gets all that receiving work. The only thing that makes me a little concerned is that with Taysom Hill, he's only saw 57% of the snaps, had 3 consecutive games with 2 or less catches, and only 50 carries for 237 and 3 touchdowns in those weeks 11 through 14. So with Taysom Hill, obviously the game plan changed a lot for them. But I think with a full offseason, knowing who they're going to run at the quarterback position, knowing what the playbook's going to look like, I feel like that will kind of revert back to what he was doing the rest of the season, which was just be absolutely dominant on the football field.
So I guess I'm the one who's out. So I guess I can say that I'm just, less on the consensus. I just am concerned. I mean, it's tough because like you guys had said, where you start to like look at the numbers and just try and figure out what options the Saints have for playmakers. It's hard to look past Kamara as like their main feature. So I don't know. I'm still just not like sold as him as RB1 like Bob is, but I do think that he's still top 5. I just feel like, I don't know. I would move Kamara for, say, like a younger piece, like a Cam Akers and a J.K. Dobbins and like a first-round pick in 22 if I'm a dynasty player. If I'm not going to if I think my team's not going to compete this year or like have that chance to win the championship, if I'm like a middle-of-the-road team, I'm willing to move on, I think. How do we think behind him, though? Do we think Latavius Murray has any viability and or the undrafted free agent Stevie Scott? The Saints did come out and say they do want to run a little bit more. So do either of these guys have any fantasy viability for either of you guys? Ryan, why don't you start us off?
This will be like the 3rd or 4th year in a row that I've loved Latavius Murray as a handcuff. I mean, he's been just absolutely the model of consistency, 6 straight seasons with 575 and 4 touchdowns. He had his first game under Hill, season high 19 carries, 124 yards and 2 touchdowns. But for whatever reason, his usage evaporated like immediately after that. He only had 25 carries for 105 yards in the 4 games total after that. I'm not quite sure why that is. I don't know if there was an injury that maybe I'm forgetting about or what it was. But to me, he's one of the top 5 handcuffs in the league because he's just so consistent and he's efficient when he gets his touches. And how they want to use their running backs, which apparently, like you said, I don't know if it was Sean Payton that came out and said it or if it was another coach that came out and said they want to lean a little bit more heavily on the running backs. I love Latavius Murray as like a flex fill-in if you need him, or he might even be a low-end RB2 in terms of Alvin Kamara having to sit for any extended period of time. But I do like Stevie Scott as a goal line back. If Murray was to get injured or anything like that, he doesn't really have that top-end speed, but he's 6'2" or 6 foot 225. Looking at him on tape, he just naturally falls forward and fights for that little extra yard. So I could see him being like a touchdown vulture type guy if he was given the opportunity to do it.
How about you, Bob? Anything for Murray or Scott?
Yeah, so I love Latavius Murray. I'm also a member of that fan club. He's going to be 31 this season, but he still hasn't reached that 1,800 carry cliff that we see running backs fall off of. So I think they're still tread on the tires, even though the age is getting up there. I have him at about 150 carries, 660 yards, 3 touchdowns. He definitely has that upside. I am ranking him right now as running back 40. He's currently being drafted at running back 44 and in a spot where you can maybe on a bye week or in like a 2-flex league start him once in a while and have the added bonus that if, that week comes where Alvin Kamara is not going to suit up, you can plug him and just be comfortable with him just out producing a lot of other people at that position. So I love Latavius Murray. And behind him, I actually have Ty Montgomery as the 3rd guy getting some snaps in the backfield. I just feel he's a weapon who can be used a lot more interesting ways. I don't think he has value. I don't think he should be owned, but I think he's someone I want to keep an eye on just for the heck of it, just for,
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, you can look at the wide receiver position and try and figure out maybe Montgomery will have some options because outside of Michael Thomas, we have question marks. And I want to get your guys' opinion. Do we think it's going to be Marquez Callaway or Traquan Smith? Bob?
No.
Neither. Nice. Ryan? Quick and simple.
I mean, I feel like if somebody has to roll out there as the wide receiver 2 for them, and if I had to choose, it'd be Traquan Smith, just because he's proven that he can be a player in the NFL level. And not that Marquez Callaway hasn't done anything. I mean, he did work in college, and New Orleans beat reporters seem to think that he has the inside track for the wide receiver 2 position from what I was looking at. So if I had to choose one, it's probably Traquan Smith, just from looking at all the stats and stuff that I look into when I'm doing research for the pod and stuff like that. It's just he's been kind of hurt by injuries. He's missed 10 games in his career because of various foot and ankle injuries and things like that. But in that playoff loss at Tampa last season, he had 3 catches, 85 yards, 2 touchdowns, had a beautiful catch in the end zone. They kind of did a spinning toe tap at the corner of the end zone there. So I feel like he could be a weapon. I just like to see him stay healthy. He was a 3rd-round pick in 2018, 6'2", 210. So he kind of profiles as that type of outside receiver, but we just haven't seen him really do it on the field yet consistently.
So Eric Ramoff here says, what did Traquan prove when MT was out? He wants Callaway on the upside side of it. So he somewhatly agrees there with you, Ryan. Somewhatly. I agree. I kind of like Callaway a little bit. Traquan Smith seems like the safe option, but I agree with him there, where Callaway kind of has probably the bigger upside of the two. Let's move on to Michael Thomas here. Is Michael Thomas going to bounce back, and is he going to be a wide receiver 1 in 2021, guys? Bob?
Yeah, so he missed 9 games with an injury in 2020, which really, I think, killed his fantasy value. This year we have him back with Jameis Winston, which could be, for the tight end 1, a guy who's going to force you the ball. I this is like a match made in heaven. This could be the best wide quarterback situation for Michael Thomas heading into this year. I am a slight downtick in targets, but coming back down to earth about 160 for 107 receptions. Again, that feels weird saying downtick in 107 receptions in the same sentence, but I guess we got to go there. I have 13 points per game, wide receiver 12 in 2021, right behind where Allen Robinson finished, right ahead of Robert Woods. So that's where I have him. I have him borderline wide receiver 1.
I like that spot. I think that you can argue, like you had said, that this is a decent match made in heaven. However, I think that you're going to see a lot less accuracy from Winston than you did with Breeze. And I'm just interested to see how Thomas reacts to that. I think Thomas is a very good receiver, and I don't think that
77.6.
Yeah, and
that is Michael Thomas's career catch percentage. That's not going to happen with Jameis Winston. I have him
that's
at
what I mean,
67, which is still very good for an outside. That's like slot receiver numbers. So I have him ungodly high for the position he plays, and that's what's going to bring him down to earth for me. Not the target share, not anything else, just the inaccuracy from the quarterback.
And that's where I agree.
6, that's so high.
Yeah, did you look at Troutman's from last year? It's absurd. Troutman's is up in like the 90s.
But that's what I'm buying.
And we're going to go there.
Buying.
Well, we'll get there in a second. But, Ryan, how do you feel about Michael Thomas? Is wide receiver 12 seem about right for you?
Yeah, I just, like you said, Jameis Winston's inaccuracies is kind of a concern. But, I mean, Michael Thomas I feel like he's still an elite option at the wide receiver position. He's coming off, outside of last year, back-to-back Pro Bowls, 2 back-to-back All-Pro seasons. Still led the team in targets on a per-game basis. But he was a career low on a per game basis in snaps, catches, yards, touchdowns, and yards per target this past season. But he's also been a consistent top 10 receiver since his rookie year. He hasn't been below a top 10 receiver, including his rookie season outside of last year. So I feel like wide receiver 12 is probably about right for the situation that he's currently in now. I honestly think if Breeze would have been back, it might have even hurt him a little bit, just because Breeze's arm was just shot after last season. And I think you could clearly see that. So I feel like Jameis Winston actually boosts his ceiling up a little bit, and I wouldn't be surprised if he finished higher than wide receiver 12. But I can't put him any lower than that. If you know what I mean.
So what you're saying is Jameis Winston's better than Drew Brees. Bob, you heard that, right? I
heard it. I took notes. We're writing it down.
Yeah, I've got it for later.
We actually isolated that soundbite already. It's going to be used on promo work next week.
Yes, for sure.
As currently constructed, Jameis Winston is a more fantasy-friendly quarterback than Drew Brees is right now, is what I would say.
I completely agree with that statement.
Anyways, let's move on. Is it fishing season, boys? Or should we be baiting for Adam Troutman? What do we feel, Bob?
I feel like the dad jokes are at that level tonight.
Hey, you know what? I am not even a dad, okay? I just have bad jokes, okay? Just back off.
I have him with 75 targets, 51 receptions, 561 yards, and 7 touchdowns. I love Adam Troutman. I always brag about my tight ends. Every year I put out the most accurate tight end cheat sheet that you will find anywhere. And it's because they don't move very much from year to year. We have very small breakouts and it's over a large amount of time, but I've seen enough. And I have to give him that target share. Nick Vannett is a good tight end. Don't get me wrong. He's great for this team, but he's blocking. We don't need to worry about any of those targets going his way. I think I have him on 20 on the season. Where we're getting Adam Troutman now, do you know where he's being drafted? He's not.
Yep.
His price is $3.99, so I will take him there all day long. If I wait a little too long, like I tend to do sometimes, I have no problem taking Adam Troutman as my tight end 1. If you're in a flex position and you want one of the guys who you know can have that boom or bust season, he can take you to the next level. I love Adam Troutman.
Yeah, and I think that's where I'm drafting him right now. I just got him in 13 or 14 in a 10-team dynasty startup. I'm taking him as almost my tight end 2, as like that, like you said, that boomer bust type player that's sitting behind like a middle range tight end 1 from last year. And I like Adam Troutman. I am all in on him. I think I was high on him last year, and I just think that the situation is going to be great. Winston's always targeted his tight ends, especially in the red zone.
Yeah.
And I think Troutman I think he's going to be easily up in that middle of tight end 1 range this season. Ryan, how do you feel?
No, I love Troutman, especially for where you're getting him at. I mean, you guys were talking about where you're getting him in drafts. I just got him literally an hour ago. I drafted him at the 1803 in a 10-team tight end premium league as my tight end 3. Like,
so I took him too early? God damn.
Or I'm just drafting with people that don't really know the value of that Adam Troutman's going to hold this season. I mean,
that's my kind of league, baby.
Take advantage.
He was PFF's best blocking tight end apparently, and I didn't expect that. I was looking into it a little bit, and I did not expect to see that. And he didn't have that great of a snap share last season, but they also had Jared Cook, who's a little bit more of a established veteran. But his snap share did increase throughout the year, so they wouldn't have let Jared Cook walk if they didn't have faith in Troutman to be the guy that they can rely on. So yeah, I'm all in on Troutman this year.
Didn't
just
Peyton
for the
come out
record,
and
I
say
have
that
him.
he is like Jeremy Shockey? Didn't Peyton relate him to Jeremy Shockey? I believe he said that. Just in case you want to know, I believe he did say that. I could be wrong, but go ahead, Bob.
In order to have him where I have him in my ranks at tight end 12, I lowered his catch percentage all the way down to 68% and gave him only 11 yards per reception. So I don't have him scoring a ton of touchdowns. I don't have him doing anything outside of the ordinary for what Adam Troutman can do. So if the targets are there and I only gave him 75, tight end 12, that's a great spot to be. That's where all those tight end congestion, between 12 and like 18, where the guys are all kind of the same. I love Adam Troutman there. I know they get a bad rap, tight ends, for being touchdown dependent, but they're also one of the more predictable positions on the field if you get the right matchup. So Adam Troutman, absolutely love him.
And there you go. You have it. Adam Troutman's the guy you want to own. All right, let's move on to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers here. The last team in the AFC or the NFC South for us. But let's move on to the ageless wonder here. Tom Brady, who finished quarterback 8 last year and averaged 21.8 per game. Bob, do we think he repeats this again?
I do. I have him at quarterback 12, right behind Matt Ryan. He's currently going quarterback 11. I'll absolutely be buying. Nothing changed. He doesn't age. He's out eating an avocado raw somewhere right now. I don't even know what he's doing, but he's taking care of himself. I'm not worried about like Drew Brees or, having a poor second half of the season. I think he just picks up where he left off. He wasn't slinging the rock. He's just a really good quarterback. So, yeah, they threw the ball 61.5% of the time in 2020. I think they're a little better, and I expect him to come back down to earth a little bit. But with the weapons he has, I have his touchdowns being a little lower, his interceptions being a little higher. But that yardage he can win you a league on just his yardage next season. I have him 4,863 projected yards, and I kept trying to reel it back in. Come on, bring it back down to reality, and I just couldn't justify having him any lower.
Yeah, I like that. And I mean, he came out and openly said this just a couple of weeks ago that he didn't learn the playbook till halfway through the season last year. He wasn't like fully comfortable. So I like Brady this year, especially if you're looking to win this year. I don't see him much as a dynasty asset outside of that. So that's what makes him super cheap in dynasty startups right now. You're getting him really late, and he's going to be that sneaky guy, like Bob said, that's going to win you a league, I think, personally. So, Ryan, how do you feel?
As much as I hate to say it, I actually really like Tom Brady for fantasy. Being a Bills fan, I'm not a huge fan of saying those words in the same sentence, but you can't really argue with what he's done. I mean, last season, 6 games lower than QB 12, but he also had 6 games as a QB 5 or better, and he was 9th on a per game basis. Actually, I was looking into fantasy footballers projections, and they have him at 5,217 yards, 40 touchdowns, and 12 interceptions. And I mean, you can, what are you gonna do with that? You can't discredit what he's doing. He's just got too many weapons, too smart of a football player. He's not gonna put you in a position where he's gonna turn the ball over a whole bunch. So as much as I don't like him personally, I love him as a fantasy option. And I mean, where you're getting him at, it's pretty ridiculous.
All right, then let's move on to the backfield here, where it just starts to get messy. Like we said, there's a ton of weapons at every single skill position here in Tampa Bay. So who do we got? Is it going to be Leonard Fournette or Ronald Jones as their RB1 this next season, or do we see it as an even split again? Bob?
I have it as a split. I have Leonard Fournette is my guy, so I had to give him a couple more. I have Leonard Fournette with 170 rush attempts, Ronald Jones with 165. I have Ronald Jones having a little better yardage, 775 to 663. Touchdowns are really close to even, but Leonard Fournette in the passing game is going to get more targets. I'm with 30 receptions for 270 yards and another 6 receiving touchdowns. That gives him the edge for me.
How about you, Ryan? Is it Leonard Fournette or Ronald Jones?
All right. So I feel like a lot of people are basing what they're doing with Fournette strictly off the postseason. I mean, 300 yards, 3 touchdowns through the postseason. He was not very good in the regular season. If you look at his regular season numbers, only 4 yards per carry twice through the whole 13 regular season games that he played. Only 5 goal line carries in regular season, 28 red zone touches. Never had more than 15 carries in a game. Had multiple just absolute duds, 7 carries, 15 yards against the Broncos, 5 carries, 5 yards against the Saints. Was a healthy scratch in week 14 where apparently he almost got cut, like they were ready to cut him because of his attitude. And Rojo was just a much more effective runner. I mean, he's a former second-round pick, 978 yards last year, 5.1 yards per carry, 8 touchdowns. In his 6 games that he had 15-plus carries, he had over 80 yards and averaged over 4.4 yards a carry. He had 7 goal line carries and 33 red zone touches, and he was 8th in yards created and yards created per touch. So I feel like he's just a better football player at this point in their careers, and I think they might trust Fournette a little bit more after his postseason. But I think Rojo is just a more explosive player, and just injuries just kind of hindered his ability to stay on the field last year.
I think I love everything you said there, and I do think Ronald Jones might be the better rusher. But the first thing I have to say, you got to dance with the girl who brought you there, and that was Leonard Fournette during the postseason. And I think he's going to get a lot more looks. The other thing I always say. And I cover Major League Soccer, and there's a lot of player turnover there. But what I always say, you got to follow the money, right? Ronald Jones was on this roster 2 years ago when they drafted Keyshawn Vaughn. Mm-hmm. He was on the roster last offseason when they brought in Leonard Fournette. They jumped on him as soon as he got cut. They're both on the roster now. They're bringing Giovanni Bernard. So I don't think it's as cut as dry as saying one of these guys is better. But I do, when I see a lot of new guys being brought in, I tend to favor the new guys over Ronald Jones Jr. here.
I like that way. And as you call it, follow the money. I always like to go with the follow what the teams do kind of mentality, not what they say, because it's true. Like, obviously something's not getting done there between Fournette and Ronald Jones to bring in Giovanni Bernard. And like you'd said, to draft Keyshawn Vaughn, they obviously weren't happy with Ronald Jones, but then Vaughn got to the side seat because Fournette got brought in. So leading us into my next question is Giovanni Bernard or Keyshawn Vaughn going to be viable as any type of fantasy, or do we just see them as kind of like only injury basis ads? Bob?
I have never owned Keyshawn Vaughn on a roster, and after seeing what's been going on with this Tampa Bay Buccaneers roster, there'd have to be a lot of a change in situation, like him moving on to a different team, for me to ever roster him in the future.
How about Gio Bernard? You had any interest in him in Tampa or no?
I love Giovanni Bernard. I just don't want him on my fantasy team.
Fair assessment. I agree. Ryan?
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat with Keyshawn Vaughn, just from looking at everything I was doing for the pod. And I mean, coach speak isn't really much of anything right now, but Arians did come out and put like a vote of confidence out for Keyshawn, saying that he should have a breakout year this year and all that stuff. But like I said, you can't really go based off of coach speak right now. I mean, there's a reason why they brought in Shady McCoy last season, and obviously they brought in Fournette and carried him to the Super Bowl. But Gio, I could see him playing that PPR role for them. I mean, 6.3 yards per carry or per target for his career, 75% catch rate. I mean, he's a good receiving back. Like I don't think they would have brought him in, and knowing Tom Brady and how Bruce Arians has kind of let him run not run personnel decisions, but he has a say in personnel decisions. I don't think they would have brought him in just to let him sit the bench and not really do anything. So I feel like he is definitely going to have some sort of role in that offense. I'm just not sure it's good enough to be a fantasy viable option in their offense.
For the record, I have him leading the backfield with 60 receptions for 360 yards. It just doesn't matter. The math isn't there. It's not enough.
Yeah, I agree. I think like maybe if you're like starting like 3 or 4 flex options, if you got like a really deep league, but outside of that, I agree. The math and just the numbers aren't there to go around, especially once you move on to the wide receiver position. You have guys and names with Chris Godwin, Mike Evans. You have Antonio Brown, Tyler Johnson, and Scotty Miller. What are we doing here, guys? Is it Antonio Brown, Tyler Johnson, or Scotty Miller? Who do we want, if any of those 3? Bob?
That's a really tough question because I have 4 wide receivers statted out that I think will have some kind of impact. I think it's Evans and Godwin, obviously, number 1. Antonio Brown, you have to play him. They paid him. He looked really good over the second half of last season. Then I do have Scott Miller. I think they're going to be targets elsewhere. I kind of, what I do when I stat my players out, I take the top 3 or 4 options and then see how many targets I have left, dump them on the last guy. So like Scotty Miller has, for the wide receiver 4, 5, and 6, kind of all those stats together. But I have Antonio Brown with 90 targets for 60 receptions, 663 yards, 4 touchdowns. That's enough for me.
Yeah, I mean that screams a nice flex option there for that. Ryan, how do you feel about Antonio Brown?
So I just did it real quick on these guys. I'd want Brown over any of them in redraft or a best ball league. I want Tyler Johnson in dynasty, and especially because Brown and Godwin could both be gone next season, I feel like Johnson's a better dynasty option. Scotty Miller does seem to have a rapport with Tom Brady a little bit. I mean, I'm pretty sure he's the one that caught that touchdown pass in the postseason right before halftime against Green Bay, I believe it was. And Tom Brady just seems to have that trust in him. But with the other 3, 4 options that are ahead of him, I can't really see him being that much of a fantasy option unless one of them gets hurt. So I want Brown in redraft and best ball and Johnson in dynasty leagues.
So let's talk about the 2 who are in front of them. Let's talk about Mike Evans. I think a guy who has been kind of just disrespected a lot. I mean, not necessarily disrespected, but like as far as fantasy drafts go or a fantasy value, it seems like he's a hard player to move or get drafted in an adequate position where he should be. He finished wide receiver 11 last year on 11.2 per game. But yet again, he's had 1,000-yard seasons every single year since entering the NFL, and he had a career high in 13 touchdowns last year. Bob, how do we feel about Mike Evans? Is this repeatable? Is he a wide receiver 1 again for you, or high-end wide receiver 2?
He's neither. He's a mid-tier wide receiver 2 for me next season. And it's just because the targets just aren't shaking down how I like, and because I think there's going to be a little bit of an efficiency drop. His career average for catch catch rate is 56.4%. Last year, that went up to 64%. You can call that the Brady boost, but on a lot of those, go up and get him balls, I think the ball just fell his way a lot more than we've seen in the past. And I think, part of that could be because there were more targets around in this offense, but I have him at about the same amount of targets. I have Mike Evans at 1,001 yards, 9 receiving touchdowns. I see a little dip in everything just because of that efficiency dip. And when we're talking about the top 20 wide receivers, that 7% is enough to put him above all those other guys. So I see Mike Evans going back down to earth. I know you don't want to see him disrespected like that on your show, but that's where I got him.
It's fair. Understandable. I won't judge you for the disrespect. It's okay. But Ryan, how do you feel about Mike Evans?
No, I agree with Bob here. He had 31% of the team's receiving touchdowns last season, 11th highest mark in the league. I don't see that being repeated again. I think their weapons are too good. Chris Godwin will be a little bit healthier this year, and I just don't see that touchdown production repeating itself again. But I mean, he has been just super consistent. I mean, 100 plus targets, 65 plus catches, 1,000 plus yards every season of his career. He's got 5 seasons of 8 or more touchdowns, and he's one of only 12 players ever with those stats to start a career. And only AB and Larry Fitzgerald are the only 2 that are currently active that have done that. So he's durable. I mean, 7 games missed in 7 seasons, so he misses a game a year. I mean, he's just. I think I have here these wide receiver 12 in ADP currently, and so maybe he's not getting that as disrespected as he has been, but he's just a consistent big body receiver that Tom Brady really has a connection with, and he's just a viable option at this current ADP right now.
I just like everyone else in that range a little better. I mean, he's going the same spot as Terry McLaurin, Amari Cooper, Chris Godwin, CeeDee Lamb. Are you taking him before CeeDee Lamb next season?
Oof.
I'm certainly not.
Tough. In Dynasty, no. In redraft, though, I think that's tougher because CeeDee Lamb is technically the number 2, and Evans is the number 1 target, technically the number 1 target in a Tom Brady-led offense. So, I mean, in redraft, that's a little bit tougher. Dynasty, no, absolutely not. I would obviously want Lamb over Evans in Dynasty.
And I think it's a good argument to be made there. I mean, obviously, Mike Evans had a career year. And like you guys said, his touchdown numbers were crazy, but the argument can be made, like you said, Antonio Brown missed time. I mean, Chris Godwin missed a lot of time. These guys are coming back, and like we'd mentioned before with the running back room and now the wide receiver room, and we'll get to it with the tight end room. There's a lot of options, and we know Tom Brady is a quarterback who he's not going to just key on one guy. He's going to spread the ball. If you're open, you're open. You're going to get the ball. If you're not open, he's going to throw to whoever's open. You know what I mean? He just tends to find those guys. So, I mean, as much as I say that, I don't think Mike Evans should be disrespected. And obviously the ADP right now that Ryan brought up being wide receiver 12 is that people have caught on. He's kind of driven up a little bit. But I can also see myself where Bob is saying, like, I would rather have Terry McLaurin or Amari Cooper over Mike Evans on the fact that both of those guys bring, I think, a big play type / yak more like production to that versus where Mike Evans kind of just seems like that 50-50 guy. He goes up, he gets the big balls. And like, how much do we expect Tom Brady to do that again this year?
I actually have a great stat for you from last season. Evans and Godwin both were near the top of the NFL with 9 25-yard or more catches. So they do have that big playability. They can get the ball. They can go up high. 9 25+ yard catches. That's every other week.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree. I think like I'm not saying like a bit that as like the big play as in that. I mean more like, so for example, you're taking a slant route and like Terry McLaurin could take it to the house. I feel like Mike Evans just doesn't have that
dragging
factor.
His toes. He's going to be dragging his toes.
You know what I mean? Like he just doesn't have that factor. Where I think Terry McLaurin, you could take that just easy 10-yard slant and all of a sudden he's gone to the house. So like I want that. At that position, I'm taking that upside over what Mike Evans is a safe floor, I feel like. You know what I mean? Like if you're drafting Mike Evans, you know what you're getting. Where Terry McLaurin, you're drafting him in that range, expecting him to be that wide receiver 1, like wide receiver 8 range. You know what I mean? Where you know Mike Evans is going to get you 12, you know? So I could see that. But let's move on real quick to Chris Godwin. I mean, do we think he returns? Obviously, he missed 4 games. So he did average 10.5 per game. So do we think Chris Godwin almost takes over the wide receiver 1 role now? Like, does he really eat into Mike Evans, or do we think it's like a 50-50, like the Fournette Rojo? Bob?
Yeah, I'm taking the 50-50. I have him right now as right at 110 targets, 76 receptions, 926 yards, and 7 receiving touchdowns. That's only enough for wide receiver 27 on the season. He's currently being drafted as wide receiver 16. I love Chris Godwin. I just don't think he's going to have the opportunity because him and Mike Evans are splitting so many similar targets. When you look at what like Antonio Brown did last season, I was just talking to Nick Script from P2W Fantasy. He was just on our show earlier, and he brought up the fact that Antonio Brown was catching screen passes behind the line of scrimmage. He was being used on bubbles. He was being used really close to the line of scrimmage. Chris Godwin and Mike Evans are going to be trying for these targets. And with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defensive improvements, they're just not going to be throwing the ball as much. Chris Godwin, I love the player, I love the talent. I got to be out, and it's just because I can't make the numbers fit.
Understandable. Ryan?
So, Bob, how many yards did you have him projected at?
926.
So, assuming that he stays healthy all season, which is obviously hard to do with 17 games now, it'd be less than 100 yards more than what he got in 12 games last year. So I mean, I can see the argument, but like I just see him getting a lot more than 25 yards per game over the game or over those games that he missed. You know what I mean? Yeah. He was 5th in QB rating when targeted, 4th in catch rate last year, 13th in yards per target. So it wasn't like he was getting just these screen yards or screen plays or anything like that, and just kind of housing them. I mean, he was getting deeper targets, and he was well above league average in that metric. Yeah. And I saw some people talking about he had drop issues last season and worried about maybe his hands are starting to get a little shaky or something like that. But people got to remember he had surgery on his index finger, which obviously is going to play a part in that. And he's never had more than 4 in any season before that. So I'm not worried about the drops or anything like that. So if anybody that's ever mentioned that, I'm not too concerned with that. But I mean, he was a top 5 wide receiver 2 seasons ago, and he's still 24, 25 years old. I mean, he could very easily take over that wide receiver 1 position if he stays healthy and if he keeps that rapport and keeps catching balls when he's thrown. Because like I said, 5th in QB rating when he's targeted in the whole league. I mean, that Tom Brady loves guys like that.
Absolutely. My problem last year, he dropped to 12.9 yards per reception from 15.5, which was his highest. And when I started him out, I gave him 69% of his catches. That is an ungodly number. So if it goes down, let's see what I have him for yards per reception, 12.2. So I have him taking another half step back to 12.2. Let's just see, I can plug it in. If I bring him up to 15.5 yards per reception, that brings him up to 1,176 yards. So there's your number, just like that, So it's really going to come down for the yards per reception for me. And I can't ignore such a step down. It's almost 3 yards per reception. That's huge.
No, that's fair. But do you think the hamstring issue played a part in that at all?
Yeah, of course. It's absolutely possible. It's absolutely possible. And maybe when we get closer to the season and I see him play in some preseason action or see him in training camp, maybe I'll lift him up a bit there. But that's the difference to me. I have Evans 14.5 yards per reception and Godwin with 12.2.
Fair enough.
I agree with both. I could see Godwin taking over, but I agree. I think that there's just too many mouths to feed here that any of these guys are really going to be super high wide receiver 1 numbers. I think 27 feels so low when you talk about it with Godwin, but I could see it happening. There's just so much talent and depth in the wide receiver position in the NFL, let alone fantasy. So I feel like I don't know. I feel like Evans is the safer bet to finish wide receiver 2 numbers than Godwin. But I think it's really dicey. It's a tough team to own fantasy assets for because of the way that they spread the ball around to all of them, which obviously works. They won a Super Bowl. So
yeah, and we're splitting hairs here. I mean, these are 2 incredibly talented guys. Yeah. So, we're just trying to see which talented guy is better than which other incredibly talented guy.
Although maybe I'm better than them. No, just joking. It's bad. I'm very bad. But anyways, let's move on to tight ends. Gronk, who finished as tight end 8 last year in a 9.3 points per game basis. Do we think Gronk repeats as a top 10 tight end this year? Or do we think Cameron Brate and a healthy OJ Howard kind of eat into that, where they're all just not really viable for anything outside of maybe flex play on a tight end premium league? Bob?
So I see Rob Gronkowski with about 65 targets, Brate and OJ Howard at about 35 each. And again, I really had to stretch to get those numbers up there. I don't think Gronkowski is going to repeat as a top 12 because we saw him coming in fresh halfway through the season. I don't know how 17 games on an old Rob Gronkowski is going to help him stay fresh come playoffs. Maybe they do keep him out again. Maybe they play Fournette with him last season, where you see OJ Howard and Cameron Brate, getting the attack early, and then at the end of the season, when Gronk, is done swimming with sharks on Shark Week or whatever he's doing now, he'll be that plug-in guy. Again, we brought up in our last podcast that OJ Howard heavily out targeted Rob Gronkowski when they were on the field together during last season. It's a small sample size, but I have to think all three of these tight ends are going to get work.
Yeah, and I like that option, and I agree. I think that I'm pretty much out on the tight ends here this year. I think Gronk, I'm grabbing him in like late rounds as like a possibility, like a big boom or bust type guy, but most likely not going to play maybe in like a bye week or something for my other tight ends. But I'm not expecting Gronk to be my main focal point at tight end. How about you, Ryan?
No, I agree. I think he's strictly a tight end or bust or touchdown or bust option at the tight end position. I'm fine with people taking him in a middle to late rounds of a tight end premium league, but I'm not looking to acquire him in any way, shape, or form unless I'm in like some sort of dire tight end situation and people are just being stingy and you have to make some sort of move. But for me, when it comes to Brate and Howard, I mean, it's availability versus ability. I mean, Cameron Brate's only missed 3 games since 2015. Howard's missed 22 since 2017. I mean, you can't trust a guy like that, even though Howard he's clearly the better physical and athletic option. He's much more physically and athletically gifted and a better blocker than Cameron Brate is. But they actually leaned a lot on Brate in the postseason. He actually almost matched his regular season production in the 4 games that they had in the postseason with 14 catches, 175 and a touchdown. So if we're playing that card with Fournette to where they used him in the postseason, I feel like Cameron Brate is that option if they want to decide to rest Gronk, or if maybe Gronk gets hurt where his back starts acting up again or something like that. I feel like Brate is just more available and they lean on him a little bit in the postseason. So I feel like he'd probably be the option for me if they were there. But Howard, like I said, it wouldn't surprise me if Howard was to become relevant if he's able to stay healthy, just because he's so physically and athletically gifted.
When I bring up where they are going in drafts currently, Rob Gronkowski is going tight end 10 at the 9th round, 2nd pick. He's going ahead of Hunter Henry, Dallas Goedert, Kyle Pitts, Evan Ingram, Robert Tonyan. Robert Tonyan, that's criminal right there. But all those guys I have over Rob Gronkowski, so I got to be out. I won't own any.
Nope.
I didn't realize he was going that high. Honestly, I haven't really looked. Like, I've looked at DLF. I just haven't really looked at the tight end position.
Over
That's
Goddard?
crazy. Yeah, that's crazy. That
Goddard's
high.
going 10th round, 6th pick. That is a round and 4 picks after Rob Gronkowski.
Wow, that's crazy to me. Well, on that crazy, awesome stat that Bob just gave us, we are going to end this show this week. Bob, why don't you lead us off and let everybody know where they can find you and what you got going on?
Find us at idsports.com, youtube.com/idsports. Just past 510 subscribers. Looking to get up to 1,000 by the end of the year. So definitely subscribe to that. Hit the bell icon so you can find out when we drop new content. We're on every major podcast platform. Just search for I80 Sports, I80 Sports. We're doing NFL. We're in full swing now. We took a couple months off, took a couple months light. I wouldn't say off, to regroup. I just finished a project before the Major League Soccer season where I interviewed, radio hosts and contributors for all 27 Major League Soccer teams. I put an article out every Wednesday, 7 straight weeks, 7 out of 7 so far in the green, winning money betting on a Major League Soccer. So you should find that at idsports.com, written article, and then a recap episode every week.
So basically what he's saying is he knows what he's talking about, so go subscribe to them. So I would fully endorse that. Ryan, why don't you let everybody know where they can find you and what you got going on?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Mackey_FFB. Going to have some articles coming out here shortly when Yards Per drops their guide here that they're going to be dropping for different strategies of redraft and dynasty and all sorts of crazy stuff. I can't even begin to list all of it, but hoping to get some positive feedback from that once it drops. I know Jeremy said it was a little long, but hoping that it's somewhat informative for at least somebody. But Bob, thank you for coming on. Really appreciate it. Great talking with you, man.
Oh, thank you for having me, guys.
Yeah, it was our pleasure, Bob. Thank you again for coming on. And like I said, I fully endorse I-80 Sports. You guys do some great work over there.
Thank you for kind words.
Oh, always, anytime. And you can find me on Twitter at PopesFFH. And like Ryan had said, you can find some of my articles over at Yards Per, as well as the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. And everybody stay healthy and see you guys next week.